Welcome to the February meeting of Friday Flicks. Our movie for this month is the classic Secret of N.I.M.H, released in 1982. This is a friendly spoiler warning for everyone. Discussion past this point and in the comment section of the posted video will contain spoilers for the film. If you haven't watched it yet, copies are available to view through the Hoopla database. This film was the directorial debut of Don Bluth, who had previously worked for Disney as an animator. The film is based off the classic children's book Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of N.I.M.H by Robert C. O'Brien. The name was changed from Frisbee to Brisby in the movie in order to avoid any potential copyright issues with the toy. As the story begins, we're introduced to Mrs. Brisby, a mother mouse who is on her way to visit Mr. Ages, a fellow mouse, in order to obtain a cure for her ill son Timmy. As she describes his symptoms, Dr. Ages diagnoses him with pneumonia and mixes up a powder for her to give him in broth, warning her that he cannot be moved from his bed or the chill in the air may prove lethal. However, moving day, the day when the farmer begins plowing his fields, forcing Mrs. Brisby's family to retreat to a summer home in order to save themselves, is quickly approaching. Although Mrs. Brisby attempts to disable the farmer's tractor and save her home, she freezes up, and Auntie Shrew has to intervene, pulling out a gas line, disabling the machine and forcing the farmer to quit work. Auntie Shrew insists that she seek out the council of the Great Owl in order to determine what to do to save her family. Although terrified at the prospect of meeting with a creature that eats mice, she summons her courage for her family and seeks him out with the help of a friendly crow, Jeremy, she had met earlier. Though at first the Great Owl states that he has no solution for her, when he realizes that her last name is Brisby and she is Jonathan Brisby's widow, he becomes more helpful, telling her to seek out the rats that live in the rosebush and have them move the house to the lee of the stone. When Mrs. Brisby slips into the rosebush to try to find the rat, she is stunned by their ornate and modern colony using electricity. Though at first she is attacked and driven off by an armed rat named Brutus, on her way out she finds Mr. Ages, who is shocked that she was able to meet with the Great Owl and live. He agrees to escort her deeper into the colony, and along the way they meet Justin, captain of the guards. As Justin and Mr. Ages escort Mrs. Brisby to the council chambers, they explain to her how they've been stealing electricity from the farm in order to fuel their colony in the rosebush. Justin and Mr. Ages explain that it is the plan of their leader Nicodemus to move the colony to Thorn Valley in order to provide their own resources and stop stealing electricity from others. When they arrive at their destination, however, the council is already in session, with the Rat General presenting a vehement opposition to the plan to move to Thorn Valley. It is his opinion that the rats should remain where they are, taking what they need and fighting anyone who attempts to disturb them. Mrs. Brisby's request for help is presented to the council, and though at first they are hesitant, with Jenner being against it completely, realizing that she is Jonathan Brisby's widow, they agree to help, and Jenner agrees to go along with the plan, believing it is the perfect opportunity to stage an assassination of Nicodemus and to make it look like an accident. Mrs. Brisby is taken to meet Nicodemus, the leader of the rats. He explains to her their history, starting out as normal rats on the streets before they were picked up and taken to NIMH, the National Institute of Mental Health, where they were experimented on. As a result of the experiments, they grew in intelligence until they were able to escape their cages. Mrs. Brisby's husband, Jonathan, had been instrumental in helping the rats escape from NIMH and had continued to help and support the growth of the colony throughout the years. One of Jonathan's main responsibilities was drugging the farmer's cat Dragon so the rats would be able to move freely throughout the farmyard. It was this job that later got him killed. Nicodemus presents Mrs. Brisby with an amulet he says Jonathan wanted her to have. He tells her that the stone contains great power if worn by one who has courage of the heart. Though the rats have the technology to move the Brisby home to a safer location in the lee of the stone, one obstacle remains to the mission: the farmer's cat Dragon. In order for the plan to succeed, Dragon will have to be drugged, but the only way into the farmhouse is through a hole too small for any rat. Mrs. Brisby summons all her courage and agrees to sneak into the house with the drug and make sure that Dragon ingests it before the mission. However, although she is able to successfully drug Dragon's food, the farmer's son catches her just before she reaches the hole and is able to escape. Placing Mrs. Brisby inside a cage, Justin is forced to leave her behind in order to supervise the mission, promising he'll return for her later. While in the cage, Mrs. Brisby overhears the farmer's phone conversation with Nim, asking if he's noticed any strange behavior recently in the rats on his farm. The farmer denies any knowledge of strange behavior by the rats, but does agree to allow Nim to come in the morning and dig out the rose bush in his front yard. Realizing the danger the rats are in, Mrs. Brisby is able to escape her cage and heads out to warn them of the impending disaster. Meanwhile, the rats have been using a series of ropes and pulleys in order to move her house safely, but Jenner puts his plan into motion, taking advantage of the opportunity and cutting through the ropes supporting the house, causing the entire structure to fall, crushing Nicodemus to death. Jenner attempts to claim that it was a tragic accident and assume control of the rats, stating that perhaps in the future they'll move to Thorn Valley, but for now they will remain in the rose bush, taking what they need and defending their home. However, Mrs. Brisby arrives, bearing the warning that Nim will be coming in the morning. Jenner calls her a liar, physically assaults her, and when he notices the amulet, attempts to take it from her by force. Justin intervenes to defend Mrs. Brisby, and he and Jenner battle. The battle ends when Jenner is stabbed in the back by a knife thrown from his former ally. However, in the chaos, Mrs. Brisby's home had landed in a large mud puddle and is slowly sinking into the muck. It appears that Mrs. Brisby's home and her children are doomed. However, the amulet begins to glow, and though it burns her hands, Mrs. Brisby holds tight and uses the power locked inside of it to pull her home free from the muck and return it to a safe place in the lee of the stone. It is shown the next morning that Mrs. Brisby and her children are well and safe, and that Timmy has even begun to recover from his pneumonia. The rats have moved on to Thorn Valley, but Mrs. Brisby believes that they will meet again in the future. I have to admit that this was the first time I had ever watched The Secret of N.I.M.H, and I'm sorry that I waited so long to see it. On a technical level, the animation was gorgeous, and I really liked that the story didn't shy away from darker elements despite being a kids' movie. The film presents several fascinating ethical questions. For me, one of the biggest being, what does one do with intelligence? The purpose behind the experiments at NIMH are never revealed in the movie. Given that it is the National Institute for Mental Health, perhaps the scientists are attempting to develop a cure for Alzheimer's, perhaps even a way to regrow brain tissues after a traumatic injury. Should such an amazing breakthrough have been achieved, the scientists most likely would have been called heroes in the press, with little to no thought given to the lives of the animals who were subjects of the experiments. But that does leave us with the question, is it ethically right for us to use animals in that way, no matter what the potential benefits? Though the rats from NIMH are regarded as being much more intelligent than the average rat, it is also to be noted that Mrs. Brisby, who did not undergo any of the treatments, is still a highly intelligent creature in her own right, and has been taught to read by her husband, Jonathan. Does this mean that the rats and mice always had the inherent ability to grow in their intelligence, and didn't need the experiments to bring it out in them? Could the scientists at NIMH have achieved the same results through compassionate therapies rather than simply injecting drugs into the rodents to see the results? In the end, we must ask ourselves the age-old question, do the ends justify the means? How far are we willing to go in our intellectual pursuits, and what do the methods we're willing to use say about us as human beings? In the end, though the rats grow in intelligence, not all of them grow in ethics and compassion. While rats such as Nicodemus, Justin, and Mr. Ages all agree that it is wrong to steal electricity from the farm when they have the resources to begin creating their own, and fully believe that a move to Thorn Valley is the best chance for the colony, rats like Jenner instead fall back on the position of taking what they can, living off the hard work of others, and going to war if necessary to defend their nest. When discussing the plot to kill Nicodemus, Jenner's ally is horrified at the idea of an assassination, to which Jenner replies, "No taste for blood, eh? They've taken the animal out of you." Despite his increase in intelligence, Jenner is still the same rat at heart he was when he was picked up off the streets by NIM. He is content to continue to, quote, live off the efforts of a man's work. However, the other rats seem to see themselves as something more. Rather than simply taking what's available, they desire to create, to build their own society and resources. Given the choice, would you remain in the rosebush and continue to siphon off electricity and other resources from the farm as needed, or would you take the risk of heading to Thorn Valley to set up your own resources and become self-sufficient? Though appearing to have immediate comfort and safety, the rosebush also includes dependency on others. Would you be willing to risk everything for Thorn Valley and the idea of forging your own destiny based on your own intelligence and wit? In the end, the movie shows us the importance of asking difficult questions to ensure that intellect is tempered by compassion and ethics. As shown through the scientists of NIM and Jenner, intellectual superiority does not equate with being a good person. Both of them exhibit extreme ruthlessness and an attempt to reach their desired ends no matter what the cost to those around them. In the end, we're left with the example of Mrs. Brisby, who used her intellect, her compassion, and her courage in order to save her family and protect the rats of NIM. However, these are just my thoughts, and I want to know what you guys think. Do you agree with Nicodemus that the rats needed to move on to Thorn Valley? Or are you on Jenner's side that they should stay in the rosebush where they know they have safety? How far would you go in order to protect a loved one? Would you act as Mrs. Brisby did, confronting a creature that might eat you for dinner in order to obtain information to save your family? Please share your thoughts and opinions in the comments section of this video. I can't wait to hear what everybody thought, and I hope you'll all stay tuned to the library's website and social media for more information on our upcoming programs. We've got some great things planned, including craft tutorials, story times, and more. See you next time!